There is a method to my madness sometimes. When you heard me in the previous video singing the Tigger song, or reciting it, I should say, because I wasn't singing it, I love this. I know that a lot of natives might consider that disrespectful, and it probably is. However, it's quite accurate when we talk about the problem that I alluded to in a previous video. I believe it was a lecture 4 or meeting 4, called Cultural Illiteracy. So we're still sticking with the idea of Indian identity and what is a real Indian. But I want to go off on this little tangent for a second. What makes a real Indian? Keep in mind that, and a lot of, you'll see this in your own, you probably already encountered it. That is the concept that I introduced you to before, called cultural illiteracy. This was way back on February 4th, 2025, when I talked about this. I defined cultural illiteracy as lack of knowledge or understanding, whether willful or unwillful, of other cultures, including the history, politics, values, and social norms of the culture in question. This is especially heinous for us natives, is it not? Of course it is. You guys know this. If you go to a larger university or college where there's not a whole lot of natives, if you go to some university, there's like 16,000, 20,000 students, 100,000, and you've got 150 Indians. And they expect you to intuit the views and concepts and cultures of 5,917 tribes stretching all the way up from the tip of Alaska all the way to the bottom tip of Tierra del Fuego, and boil it all down into a single Indian point of view. They expect you to be the spokesman of all these Indians. That's part of cultural illiteracy. And remember when Tigger, I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember the Tigger cartoons where he would say, "I'm the only one," and he had the dumb little song and dance. And he would say, "Tiggers love honey," because he's the only one. He can get away with it. And a lot of times, as Indians in these bigger institutions, or even on the job, you can say pretty much anything, and people will believe you. You can make up stuff about Indians because you're surrounded by non-Indians, and they're thinking, "Oh man, Indians are really weird. You know, Indians, this Indian, that Indian, he's representative of all of the Indians." Never mind, I'm starting to go off on this tangent too much. Let's get back to this because it's related some weird way. Especially, we want to talk a little bit about these two here, the Black Indians, the freedmen. If you know anything about recent history, what's been going on with them, let me see, there's a Lumbee, the Mashpee, the Mashantucket Pequots, and then there's also the Cherokee freedmen, the Seminole freedmen. There's a whole bunch of these tribes that intermarried with the black slaves or African American slaves back during slavery time, whereas, you know, the newcomers, when they brought slaves, they, "Oh, these are forced labor." What a lot of the tribes were doing is, instead of forcing these new slaves to work, they were buying slaves and bringing them in their families to replace other Indians who were killed by the newcomers or who died of some weird disease that was brought from Europe. And the tribe is just decimated. We need to pump up our numbers. We lost all our family members. We need some more people. And so they go to the slave market and buy slaves and adopt them into the tribe and intermarry with them, because there's a lot of cultural similarities in those days. A lot of the stories were also similar. However, now we got to fast forward to modern times. So Cherokee and I believe some Seminoles in the modern times, they were trying to kick out the Black Indians from their tribe, and that turned into a huge mess. You can look it up on your own, Google it, you'll see what I'm talking about. They were called freedmen. And it was a huge mess, like I said before. But never mind, we don't have enough time to talk about that. We also have to talk about the Mexicans, the Mexica. Because this is one, and I don't want to get all political on you, but there's a certain politician who infests the White House right now. He actually sued the Indians. They don't look like Indians to me. Never mind, I'm not going to get political. Look it up. They don't look like Indians to me. He was mad at the black Indians, but he's also mad at Mexicans because Mexicans primarily are natives. Nobody likes to admit this, but we know it's true. And look in our own hearts. Look at you think for yourself. Look deep inside. And you'll realize a lot of these Mexicans, most of those guys are natives. They're just south of the border Indians. We know this. Let me show you something. I didn't plan to put this up here, but I'm going to put it up here anyway. Let's do this. We want to look up Aztec dancers. You oftentimes will see these guys. I'm going to put videos or images. There we go. Especially if you go to California. If you go to California or the West Coast, and you'll see these natives. These guys are primarily from Mexico, and there's also a tribe called Yahi, and there's some Mayans, and these guys are real natives, but they just wear these big feathers. I forgot what these are called. I don't know if they're pheasant feathers or what, but they're huge, but they're legitimate, real Indians south of the border. However, as I mentioned before, as we all know, there is a tendency in the U.S. to look down and say, they're not real Indians, they're just Mexicans trying to get across the border. Never mind, I don't want to get into that right now. We talked about the runaways and urban Indians. This is kind of related as well to the Tigger issue that I mentioned before, where urban Indians oftentimes have lost their connection, and the runaways too, to their historic culture, their language, and a lot of their stories. There are some tribes, for example, in Los Angeles, where they live in these little, I don't know, enclaves or something. They're little neighborhoods where this is back in the 70s. It's not so common now because a house in Los Angeles is like $500,000 all the way up to $2 million to buy a house in LA. I'm talking back when houses were $14,000. And anyway, the natives, when they would move, they started off, I'm going to pull up another map, because this was very common. Keep this in mind. We're talking in the 60s and 70s. Let's go back to Google Maps. Just hit the reverse button. There we go. So here is, oh, stop it. What I was mentioning before, the idea of the Trail of Tears, and the Potawatomi, my people called it the Trail of Death, because there were multiple times the government marched Indians at gunpoint. The Potawatomi people originally from up here, we got moved down here to Indiana, then we got moved over here to Iowa, I think it was Council Bluffs, Iowa. Then they got moved down to Marietta, Kansas, and then they said, no, and they kept moving them, and they ended up in Oklahoma. Oklahoma, where to win? Well, as you know, when they were moving all these Indians to Oklahoma, a bunch of Indians ran up to Canada, and others went down to a place called, I think it's called Monterrey, there it is, Monterrey, Mexico, and Nuevo Leon, somewhere down there. Yes, there it is right there. So a lot of natives did this, and other Indians stayed down or stayed up for a little while, and then they decided to sneak back into the country, USA, and instead of going to Oklahoma, they joined the railroad. They got a job at the railroad, and they moved from over here, and they moved down big cities, and they became urban Indians. Some of the Potawatomi did this. They ended up in a place called San Bernardino. There it is right there, in this area right here. They worked in this kind of desert. See over here where it's all brown, this is all desert. And over here it's a little half brown, half green. A lot of the natives were out there working on farms after having worked on the railroad, and they moved their families from over there, and some came from the south. A bunch of Indians, they all got together, and they were living in San Bernardino, Riverside, and all this area here. And then as time moved on, they moved over to a certain part of LA. I want to say this area here, not Lakewood, right north of Long Beach. First they were in Pomona, which Pomona's over here somewhere, can't remember where. But then when they would move as clan members. I mean, a whole family. They'd all just sell their houses all and move. And that's why there's all these little itty bitty neighborhoods of natives. There's Carson, California. And there was a big community over by IKEA too. But it was, where is it? Carson Mobile Home Park? No, it was over off Main Street. And there it is, Del Amo Plaza. This area here. Because there's a university up there. But this area was full of Indians back in the 70s. And the houses in this neighborhood were like $35,000. There it is. Yep. So even though these natives have lost a lot of their culture and a lot of their stories and their language, some of them maintained a connection, familial and tribal or clan band relationships. And when the elders and these tribes would die off, then of course they'd lose more language or lose more culture, and then the younger generation would try to reconstitute, rebuild a lot what they lost. Let me get rid of this and go back to the subject, you see. So, the problem is when we come across this, item C. How are we doing on time? I talk too much. 12 minutes and 44 seconds. Right. We have this shows up in the literature, is what I'm trying to get across to you. And I gotta stop saying you see so much. Exposing the wannabes. There is a movement which probably started in the 80s, this idea that we've got all these fake Indians running around, and we are going to expose them. So, writers like Sherman Alexie, Tiffany Midge, who we already talked about before, they like to make fun of wannabes. In the old days, they used to call them twinkle bunnies as well because, you know, they were a little bit airy-fairy. I believe Tiffany Midge just wrote a funny article about what she called them sparkle wolves. I don't know what a sparkle wolf is, and I don't want to look it up because we don't have enough time anyway. But if you read Tiffany Midge's work, and it's pretty much in everything that she ever writes, there's at least a poem or a short story or a short blurb making fun of she calls them now Pretendians. Pretendian is a term, I believe, that got popularized by Keeler. Who's Keeler? Well, let me pull up a picture of her and show you who she is. I believe she is part Navajo and part Yankton. Who is Keeler? Jacqueline Keeler. There she is. And you can Google her or Wikipedia her. She's a Native American writer, activist, enrolled in Navajo, and she's of Yankton descent. And one of the things that she is famous for is searching for and eradicating Pretendians, exposing them. She says that, I think that is the Cree lady. What was her name? She's a singer. Let me just click on it. Who is that girl? She used to be on Buffy St. Marie. Buffy St. Marie, she says, is not a real Indian. She's a Pretendian. I'm not going to step into that big old swamp. There's a bunch of others. I think Cher used to call it, the singer, Cher, used to say she was Indian. And again, all these people, we've got Elizabeth Cook Lynn, Joy Harjo, Kim Tallbear. By the way, Liz Cook Lynn, the late Liz Cook Lynn, I believe she was from, what was the name of that tribe? Oh no, she's down in Crow Creek, I think is where she, no, it says Fort Thompson. Is that part of Crow Creek? Anyway, never mind, I'm talking too much. But she was there. Joy Harjo, I believe she is from the Muskogee Nation. Let me see where she's from. Joy Harjo, what does it say what her tribe is? Does it say Muskogee? Yeah, I was right. Look at that. I'm not as dumb as I thought I was. She makes fun of Pretendians. Kim Tallbear, who is a relatively new name, she's up in Canada, but she's from this place, from the Sisseton, Wahpeton, Oyate. But she's up in Alberta, Canada. Ooh, Kim Tallbear. She's big on exposing Pretendians. As I mentioned, Jacqueline Keeler and Philip Deloria, who is the son of Vine Deloria. We know who that is, right? So, again, we are exposing the wannabes. And why are we doing this? It's because three main reasons. Number one, a lot of the wannabes are just stealing the culture, and like culture vultures, not really giving credit where credit is due, and they're doing it in a harmful and disrespectful way. Another one, they're stealing the voices of legitimate, real RLIs, real live Indians. By doing this, they're actually I can't say that word, marginalizing the RLIs and silencing them because they're hogging up all the spotlight, hogging up all the glory. And then, of course, the other has to do with money. Majiska. Fraud. Funding and job opportunities or whatever, or business opportunities. If the Pretendians are hogging up the money, whenever there's some new program for natives, native businessmen, native students, whatever it is, and the Pretendians jump on it really fast, because you know how a lot of us RLIs are. We take our sweet time, we procrastinate, and say, yeah, we'll do it. And we wait till like midnight before the day it's due, and then we turn it in. But by then, all the Pretendians have hogged up all the applications, right? We know this. All right. So, it's still problematic, you see, this idea of who is an Indian and who isn't. As Tallbear points out, she says we can't just rely on DNA tests. Because a lot of times, people these days have been, oh, well, we got new DNA, 23andMe, blah, 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 blah. And they'll take these tests, oh, look at this, I'm so much 23% Indian, yay! And then they go off and apply for Indian scholarships. I want some of that free Indian money, right? So Kim Tallbear says don't just rely on the DNA. Besides, I believe that we kiss too much DNA, but anyway, because a lot of times, you never know what gets switched around in the DNA labs. Never mind. It's also problematic, as I mentioned before, the ones who have been un-Indianed by the government. And I put Indian Tiggers again. That's the ones that are like wandering around. They don't even know what tribe they are. There's an era that I didn't put on here called the era of silence. I'll talk about that in a second. I think I'm running out of time, probably 17 minutes. Nope, 19 minutes and 20 seconds. We're going to stop it there. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.